Guys, I'm back and we're going to be doing Metasploit introduction. So for task 1 here, introduction to Metasploit, and I'm just going to read through this a little bit as we go through this room. Metasploit is the most widely used exploitation framework. Metasploit is a powerful tool that can support all phases of a penetration testing engagement, from information gathering to post-exploitation. Metasploit has 2 main versions. Metasploit Pro, the commercial version that facilitates the automation and management of tasks. This version has a graphical user interface and the Metasploit framework, the open source version that works from the command line. This room will focus on this version, installing the attack box and commonly used penetration testing Linux distributions. The Metasploit framework is a set of tools that allows information gathering, scanning, exploitation, exploit development, post-exploitation, and more. While the primary use of the Metasploit framework focuses on penetration testing domain, it's also useful for vulnerability research and exploit development. The main components of the Metasploit framework can be summarized as follows: msfconsole, the main command line interface; modules, supporting modules such as exploits, scanners, payloads, etc. Tools, standalone tools that will help vulnerability research, vulnerability assessment, or penetration testing. Some of these tools are MSF Venom, pattern create, and pattern offset. We will cover MSF Venom within the modules, but parameter create and parameter offset are tools useful in exploitation development, which is beyond the scope of this module. This room will cover the main components of the Metasploit, while providing you with a solid foundation on how to find relevant exploits, set parameters, and exploit vulnerable services on a target system. Once you have completed this room, you'll be able to navigate and use Metasploit command line comfortably. You can deploy and use the attack box to complete the task and answer the questions. So we'll go ahead and click question done, and we'll move on to task 2. While using Metasploit framework, you will primarily interact with the Metasploit console. You can launch it from the attack box terminal using msfconsole command. The console will be your main interface to interact with the different modules of the Metasploit framework. Modules are small components within the Metasploit framework that are built to perform a specific task, such as exploiting a vulnerability, scanning a target, or performing a brute force attack. Before delving into the modules, it would be helpful to clarify a few recurring concepts: vulnerability, exploitation, and payload. Exploit, a piece of code that uses a vulnerability present on the target system. Vulnerability, a designed code or logical flaw affecting the target system. The exploitation of the vulnerability can result in disclosing confidential information or allowing the attacker to execute code on the target system. Payload, an exploit can take advantage of a vulnerability. However, if we want the exploit to have the results we want, gain access to the target system, read confidential information, etc., we need to use a payload. Payloads are the code that will run on the target system. Modules and categories under each one are listed below. These are given for reference purposes, but you can interact with them throughout the Metasploit console, msfconsole. Auxiliary. Any supporting modules such as scanners, crawlers, fuzzers can be found here. Encoders. Encoders will allow you to encode the exploit and payload in the hopes that a signature-based antivirus solution may miss them. Signature-based antivirus and security solutions have a database of known threats. They detect threats by comparing suspicious files to the database and raise an alarm if there's a match. Thus, encoders can have a limited success rate as antivirus solutions can perform additional checks. Evasion. While encoders will encode the payload, they should not be considered a direct attempt to evade antivirus software. On the other hand, evasion modules will try that, with more or less success. Exploits. Exploits neatly organized by the target system. NOPS. No operations, do nothing. Literally, they are represented in the Intel x86 CPU family. They are represented with 0x90, following which the CPU will do nothing for a cycle. They are often used as a buffer overflow to achieve consistent payload sizes. Payloads. Payloads are encoded that will run on a target system. Payloads are codes that will run on a target system. Exploits will leverage a vulnerability on the target system, but to achieve the desired result, we will need a payload. Examples could be getting the shell, loading a malware or backdoor on the target system, running a command, or launching calc.exe as a proof of concept to add to more penetration test reports. Starting the calculator on the target system remotely by launching the calc.exe application is a benign way to show that we can run commands on the target system. Running commands on the target system is already an important step, but having an interactive connection that allows you to type commands that will execute on the target system is better, such as an interactive command line is called a shell. Metasploit offers the ability to send different payloads that can open shells on the target system. You will see 3 different directories under payloads: single, stager, and stages. Adapters. An adapter wraps single payloads to convert them into different formats. For example, a normal single payload can be wrapped inside a PowerShell adapter, which will make a single PowerShell command that will execute the payload. Single self-contained payloads add users launch notepad.exe that do not need to download an additional component to run. So it just runs that single payload. Stagers, responsible for setting up a connection channel between the Metasploit and the target system. Useful when working with stage payloads. Stage payloads will first upload a stager on the target system, then download the rest of the payload stage. This provides some advantage as the initial size of the payload would be relatively small compared to the full payload sent at once. So it uses multiple stages in order to run the payload, essentially. Stages, downloaded by the stager. This will allow you to use larger sized payloads. Metasploit has a subtle way to help you identify singles, also called inline payloads and stage payloads. Generic / shell / reverse / TCP, and the Windows / x84 / shell / reverse / TCP. Both are reverse window shells. The former is an inline or single payload as indicated by the /. So if it has an /, then it's a single payload. And reverse, well, the latter is a stage payload indicated by the /. So if it has a /, then it's gonna require multiple stages in order to run the payload. Post modules will be useful on the final stage of the penetration testing process listed above, post-exploitation. So once you've gained access, then you will be able to run post-exploitation. If you wish to familiarize further with these modules, you can find them under the module folder on your Metasploit installation or the attack box under op, Metasploit framework, embedded framework modules. Okay. So we'll go through some of the answers here. What is the name of the code taking advantage of a flaw on a target system? That's going to be exploit. And this is very important because I actually was asked this once during an interview. So it's something that, you need to understand is that the code taking advantage of a vulnerability means that that code is exploiting that flaw. Therefore, it's going to be exploit. What is the name of the code that runs on a target system to achieve the attacker's goal? So we want to get the payload on the system and run the payload. That way we can gain control. what are self-contained payloads called, and those are singles because it's all self-contained in one payload. And what is the Windows /x64 / pingback reverse DCP among singles or stage payload? And this is a singles because, as we heard earlier, if it has the shell /, then it's gonna be a staged, but if it has /, then it's gonna be a single. That's single. And I'm gonna do what I usually do for you guys. I'm going to copy and paste the answers here to the description of the video. So if you're following along with any of my videos, you guys will get that. That way you guys don't have to go visit some shady sites. Rather, you guys can just look at my YouTube videos, which are always safe, always have the flags. I always walk you guys through the process, and we get through it together. All right, so let's move on to task 3, msfconsole. And you can see this one's a little bit long, so let me go ahead and pull up my msfconsole up as well. Okay, and so we'll just read through this. As previously mentioned, the console will be your main interface to the Metasploit framework. You can launch it using msfconsole command on your TACbox terminal or any system the Metasploit framework is installed on. So we run msfconsole. Once launched, you'll see a command line change to the msf6 or msf5, depending on the installation version of Metasploit. The Metasploit console, msfconsole, can be used just like a regular command line shell, as you see below. The first command is ls, which lists the contents of the folder from which Metasploit was launched using the msf command. So if we do that, it'll list the files. All right. It is followed by a ping sent to Google DNS 8.8.8. As we operate from the attack box, which is Linux, we had to add the -C1 option, so only a single ping was sent. Otherwise, the ping process would continue until it is stopped using C. Okay. It will support most Linux commands, including clear, to clear the terminal, but will not allow you to use some features of regular command lines and does not support the output of redirects. While on the subject, the help command can be used on its own or for specific commands. Below is a help menu for the set of commands we will cover soon. So help set. You can use the history command to see commands you have typed earlier. So you type history. An important feature of MSF is the support of tab completion. This will come in handy later when using the Metasploit commands or dealing with modules. For example, if you start typing HE and then press the tab key, you'll see autocomplete help. msfconsole is managed by content. This means that unless set a global variable, all parameter settings will be lost if you change the module you have decided to use in the example below. We have used the ms17/0110 internal blue exploit, and we'll have a set parameter such as RHOSTS. If we were to switch to another module, port scan, we will need to set the RHOST value again as all of this changes, and we have made remained in the context of the ms17 external blue exploit. Let us look at the examples below to have a better understanding of this feature. We'll use the ms17 eternal blue exploit for illustration purposes. Once you type use exploit windows smb eternal blue command, you will see the command line prompt change from msf6 to msf6 exploit windows smb ms17 10 eternal blue. The eternal blue is an exploit allegedly developed by the NSA for a vulnerability affecting the SMB-v1 server on numerous Windows systems. The SMB server message block is widely used in Windows networking for file sharing, and even for sending files to printers. Eternal Blue was leaked by cybercriminals, shadow brokers in April 2017. In May 2017, this vulnerability was exploited worldwide in the WannaCry ransomware attack. Okay, the module to be used can be selected with the use command followed by the number at the beginning of the search result line. So yeah, so if you want to use it, you just type in use and then exploit Windows SMB. And I know we're going to have to actually use this for this upcoming lab, so might as well start getting that running. And let me show you how to actually use it. All right, and first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna connect to the TRYHACKME network using my script that I've created for open.sh, and that's gonna connect to the network for me rather than having to run the OpenVPN script every single time. Anyhow, once we are in, you can see that the first thing you're going to do is go ahead and open up Metasploit with the msfconsole. And so what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and move this over to the left. That way you can see my screen over here. We'll just work over here. All right, perfect. So we'll type in msfconsole. And you just got to give it a second to load. And while that's loading, I'll just continue reading through this. While the prompt has changed, we will notice we can still run the command previously mentioned. This means we did not enter a folder as you would typically expect in an operation system command line. Okay, show options. The prompt tells us we have a context set in which we will work. You can set this by typing the show options command. Okay, so once we actually go to use, all right, let me go ahead and type that in. So we're going to use exploit Windows, and so we know we're working with the exploit modules, and part of that's going to be the internal blue that was allegedly created by the NSA. And then here you can see it set the default payload to Windows x64, which is okay in this case. However, do note that x32 or x86, I believe, it'll run on any system. So 64 is also good, but sometimes you may want to just use x86 or for the 32-bit version. Anyhow, let's go ahead and do show options. So when we do show options, it's going to show us what options are required and which ones we can input. So here you can see in this case, it set the L host to one of my Ethernet adapters. However, that's definitely not the one we want to use for this lab. And it set the L port, which is the listening port, to 4444. You can see here it's requiring us to provide it a R host, so the target's port, as well as let's see here, what else we got. You could specify a SMB domain, and if you don't know what SMB is, so SMB is quite simply, and 100% everyone's interacted with it in a workplace, especially if you work in an office where you've had to like map to a printer, or if you've had to access a share drive that's located on some share server or some computer, and you've mapped to it. You're using SMB to do that, and it's running over port 445. And so, this is something that's could be exploited by Eternal Blue. So when we do show options, just gives us some options there. This will print the options related to the exploit we have chosen earlier. The show options command will have different outputs depending on the context it is used in. The example above shows that this exploit will require we set the variable like RHOSTS and RPORT. On the other hand, a post-exploitation module may only need us to set a session ID. See the screenshot below. A session is an existing connection to the target system that the post-exploitation module will use. Okay, so here you can see, like I mentioned earlier, you're gonna have to set the RHOST and the RPORT. The show command can be used in any context followed by a module type auxiliary payload exploit to list the available modules. The example below lists payloads that can be used with the MS-17 external blue exploit. And so earlier I mentioned how it's using the default payload. However, if you want to set payloads, you can always do the show payloads here. And then here's the different payloads that you can actually use. And there's quite a bit. If we use the MSF prompt, the show command will list all modules, and the use and show option commands will have what we have seen so far are identical for all the modules and then Metasploit. You can leave the context using the back command. Okay, interesting. Further information on any module can be obtained by typing the info command within its context. So we'll just type info, and this will give you some information regarding this module. And it's got some useful information, like, for example, the name of the module, the platform it's made for, and the developer of it. In this case, Shadow Brokers will tell you what this can be used against. So everything from Windows 7 to Windows 10. Again, it's going to give you the options. It also gives you a description, something that you can Google yourself to find out some more information about what Eternal Blue is actually doing. That's very useful. And then it refers you to NIST. And so if you don't know where NIST is run by the Department of Homeland Security. They provide cybersecurity information to include, they cover CVEs and CVSSs in great detail, and they utilize information from MITRE to cover that as well. So this is all great information that you have at your fingertips. Let's go ahead and scroll down a little bit here. Alternatively, the info command followed by the module path for the MSF prompt info, and then you could also just specify this when you're as soon as you log into msfconsole. One of the most useful commands in msfconsole is search. This command will search the Metasploit framework database for modules relevant to the given search parameters. You can conduct a search using CVE numbers, exploit names, Eternal Blue, Heartbleed on the target system. All right, so that's a really great point right there. And why don't I just open up another one here? So if I were to type msfconsole and load it, you will have a search option. And I use this all the time, especially when I'm doing other capture the flags. If I find that a system might be vulnerable to a certain CVE, or maybe they're using a certain software version, then I could just input that here. So if we were to search MS-17, this is probably going to be the most useful information you can have here. You can see it's going to provide us some of the names of the modules we can use. You can see the one that we're currently using. Looks like it might be this one. Is that? Nope, that's an accelerator. So we would want to use this one. This is the one that we're using right now, because that's the exploit that would actually allow us to gain access to the system. So that's very useful information right there. The output of the search command provides an overview of each return modules. You may notice the name column already given for more information than just the module's name. You can see the type of module, auxiliary, exploit, etc., and the category of the module: scanner, admin, Windows, Unix, and you can use any module turned in a search result with the command use followed by the number at the beginning of the result. So what it's telling you here is if you wanted to, for instance, use 0, which is what we would want to use, we would just type use 0. And 0 is this entire column here. And if you want to see the entire thing, that's what it looks like. And we're essentially telling Metasploit, hey, we want you to load this, which is the one we're currently using for external blue, so we can exploit the system, and it'll load it just like that. Another essential piece of information returned is the rank column. Exploits are rated based on their reliability. Table below provides their respective descriptions. So you have ranking based on how good these are, and you can see that this one's the one that we're going to use is pretty average. You can see if you try to run any of these other ones, they're normal, and then this one at the bottom is great because it apparently just works all the time. So that's something to look at. You know, if one of these said low, you probably wouldn't want to use it, especially in a production environment. And you would also want to do some research before you start running these against your targets because you don't want to DOS them. That's for sure. For example, if you wanted our search results only include auxiliary modules, we can set the type to auxiliary. The screenshot below shows the output of the search type auxiliary telnet commands. So this is auxiliary, may help with enumeration, but the exploit, like you see here, well, that may be better if you're actually trying to exploit the system. So it's just depending on your usage and what you're trying to do. So here it says, how would you search for a module related to Apache? And you can just type search Apache. And if we wanted, we can actually do that right now. So let me go ahead and try. Let me try pasting in here. I don't think I've run it like that. Oh, look at that. So you can actually run it straight from where you're, even though it loaded a module, you can just run it right on top of that module, and you can choose one of these if you wanted to. That's pretty cool. Let's see if it works. So let's try use 32. And just like that, it went over to another module. So that's very cool. Who provided the auxiliary scanner SSH /module? So if we wanted to see that, we can simply just type in use, and we'll just grab that information there. And then we'll come over here, paste it in, or actually we might be able to just type in info. Let me try that. There we go. So I typed info followed by the module that we wanted to use, so we can get info on it. And if we want to see who created it, you can see that todb created that, and you can just copy that because this provides you all the information about it. All right, perfect, cool. Let's go over to task 4 now, where we're going to get our hands dirty, which I like. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the machine. I'm gonna reconnect it to the TRYHACKME network. So if you haven't connected, go ahead and connect. All right, and let's go ahead and read through this. We can launch the target machine attached to this room to replicate the example shown below. Any Metasploit version 5 through 6 will have menus and screens similar to those shown below. All right, once you have entered the context of the module using use command followed by the module's name as seen earlier, you will need to set the parameters. The most common parameters you will use are listed below. Remember, based on the modules you use, additional or different parameters may need to be set. It is good practice to use show options command to list the required parameters. All parameters are set using the same command syntax. Set parameters, name, value. Before we proceed, remember always to check the msfconsole prompt to ensure you are in the right context. When dealing with Metasploit, you may see 5 different prompts. So regular command prompt, okay. So saying, hey, don't get lost, make sure you're using Metasploit framework. Okay, sounds good. And we were just using this a second ago. Let me see if I still have that terminal open. I may have closed it. Nope, I still have it open. So we'll go ahead and use the Windows SMB MS17 Eternal Blue exploit. All right. And so you could just type this into msfconsole and it will then navigate there just like we are navigated here. Okay. And then once you do that, you can do show options like we did earlier. It will list what's required. We'll go ahead and set the rhost. So it looks like it's loaded the IP for me. So I know what the target IP address is. I know I'm going to have to correct the lhost because I am using my own machine. And I know that the lhost wasn't correct. So I'll need to adjust that. So why don't I do that first? Let me go ahead and open up a terminal. I'm gonna do ifconfig. And if you're using their attack box, you don't have to do this. But if you're using your own, which I highly recommend, you will need to do this. So let's go here. Let's go ahead and copy that. Go here, set lhost. Oh, it's not with the S. Okay, set lhost, and we'll go ahead and paste this in. Just like that. And then I'm paste that in. And the port's okay. I believe it's using 4444 if I was mistaken earlier. Let me check. Yeah, it's using 4444. Okay, 4. So let's go ahead and set the rhost. So I have the rhost IP address. That's our victim. And I'm going to do set and then input the victim's IP address and actually set rhost. Perfect. And by default, it should exploit port 445, but let me just check to see if that's something we need to set. Show options. Yeah, so it looks like it's gonna exploit 4445, which it should, but let me go ahead and do show options. And yeah, 4445, good. So it's the SMB port. And then after that, we should be able to just run this, right? Let's see what it says here. Once you have set the parameters, use show command. Our host is the remote host, of course. Our port, the payload is already set. The al host is your attack box. The al port is the port that's listing on your attack box. And session connection to the target using Metasploit session IDs. Okay, gotcha. You can overwrite any set parameter using the set command again with a different value. You can also clear any parameters using the unset command or clear all set parameter with the unset parameters. Okay, so if you want to unset all of this, you can just do unset all. It's not something we want to do though. And then here you can use the setg command, set values that will be used for all modules. The difference is that if you use set command to set the value using a module, when you switch to another module, you have to reset the command. So in essence, if you set the rhost here, but then you go and use the Apache module, then you'll have to reset and put in our rhost again. But if you don't want to do that, you can use setg. All right. And the example below uses the following. We use Eternal Blue exploit. We set the rhost variable using setg command instead of the set command. We use the back command to leave the exploit context. We use the auxiliary module scanner to discover the MS17 vulnerability. The show option confirms. Commands show the rhost parameter is already populated with the IP address of the target system. Okay, so that was a lot to ingest. Let's go ahead and do exactly what they told us, because this is something you should do before you run an exploit. You should have enumerated and discovered that it is vulnerable, right? So let's go ahead and do setg lhost. setg rhost. And now if we were to use the auxiliary scanner, so the auxiliary scanner is just what it sounds like. It's used when you first enumerate. So I like to think of this in military terms because I was in the military. And, you know, when you're in the military, you try to identify targets of opportunity. And once you identify those targets, then you'll try to exploit a vulnerability. And in this case, that's what we're trying to do. We found this system, and they gave us this IP address here. We're scanning that system to see if it's vulnerable, in this case, MS-17. And once we identified it is vulnerable, then we've acquired our target and we're going to attack it. So let me go ahead and try to use this, okay? And it looks for like this one right here. Let's see here. We already specified everything, right, with the setg. So we can simply just go ahead and go to show options to just verify that everything's set. Looks like our host is set, and that's all we need. Okay, so next I'm gonna just type exploit. And it should run to see if it's vulnerable. It says host is likely vulnerable to MS-17, which is internal blue, because it has the Windows 7 professional, and it's looking at the service pack to identify if it's vulnerable. So we have now identified that the target is vulnerable. So let's go ahead and acquire this target and engage. All right, so let's go ahead and move back to where we were. We were getting ready to exploit it. So let's go back to this exploit module here. Because again, auxiliary is just for scanning. It's just for identifying if that target is in fact vulnerable. Once we've identified it's vulnerable, then let's attack it, right? That's what we want to do. So let me see if I could just type up until I get to the one we're using. So use exploit Windows SMB SM17 internal blue. All right, and since everything's already set on that one, we can just type exploit. It should run. And you can see this is going to see if SMB version 1 is being used, because SMB version 1, which is actually still being used on some machines, it's something that a lot of corporations haven't patched, and it's something that you may actually find in like a pen test, right? If they're still using SMB version 1, or if SMB version 1 and 2 are, you're able to use both of those. Once it finds the once it determines that, it will go ahead and run the exploit, which will essentially, I believe it just does a buffer overflow and it gains access to it, because as you see here, SMP buffer right there. And once it does that, then it's able to initiate a interpreter shell here. So this interpreter session is like a command line session, except better, right? Sysinfo provides us the information here. We can see that we are now connected to a Windows 7 machine. All right, perfect. And you could background this as well. So if I want to background this, all I need to do is, let's say I want to do some other stuff. I could just click background, just type background like this, and type it correctly. Background, it's gonna say, hey, we're backgrounding this, okay? And then if you want to say, oh, wait, hey, I actually don't need to do anything over here. Let's say you wanted to do some more auxiliary scanning. You want to do some more enumeration. So you just background this session. You'll say, oh, I'll come back to it. And then let's say you're like, all right, I'm ready to go back to it. Just type sessions. And you can see that session is ready for you. Session 1 is running the background, right? And if you want to use it, you just type sessions -I followed by the identifier here. And then you should be able to use it. Go ahead and take a look here. sessions 2. I always forget the S. Yeah, type session, enter sessions 2. All right, and now you can see we're back in our session, right? And you can use Linux commands, so I can use ls if I wanted to, and I can list the directories. This is going to fill up the screen, right? I can go back in directories. It's the same thing as a regular terminal, really. I could ls it again, see where I'm at. Okay, I'm in the main C directory, so I'll go to cd users, the ls, and then here you can see we got John public, cd John, ls, and then you can see we are now in his profile. So we'll go to cd desktop, and if he had a flag, this is where it would be. Let's see if there's any flags here. Oh no, there's not. But you know, it's cool, just showing you how you can like move around, right? And so here, set the LPORT to 6666. How would you set the RHOST and allow it to set that kind of permanently through your session? But once I close this terminal, this session's gone. You'll have to redo everything, right? What command would you use to clear the set payload? Unset payload. So if I use unset payload, right now I have the basic x64 payload loaded, but if I set unset payload, then it would just like get rid of that. It would also get rid of all the options I just, are you gonna do unset all to get rid of everything, or the R host that you set, the L host that you set, the L port, all that stuff? What command do you use to proceed with the exploitation phase? Use the exploit, right? Or you can use run. You can actually use exploit or run. It's one or the other. And task 5 summary. So as we have seen so far, Metasploit is a powerful tool that facilitates the exploitation process. The exploitation process comprises of 3 main steps: finding the exploit, customizing the exploit, and exploiting the vulnerable service. Metasploit provides many modules that you can use for each step of the exploitation process. Throughout this room, we have seen basic components of Metasploit and their respective use. It would be best if you also had used the MS1710 Eternal Blue exploit to gain access to the target VM. In the following room, we will cover Metasploit and its components in more detail. Once complete, this module should give you a good understanding of the capabilities of Metasploit. All right, we'll click done there, and you should see confetti. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys watching these videos. Please like and subscribe. Have a good one.